Okay, so why don't we start off with some just general introductions. The folks that are in the room, just a quick your name and which company you're from. We'll just keep it brief because we have a fairly large group of folks here. And let's see, Nate, why don't you start off?
Gladly. Nate Tockerman. I'm a partner manager at Procore. I've been with the company about 2 years. Prior to that, worked for Rosen Electric for 11 or 12 as a PM out of the Bay Area.
Very good. Travis.
Travis Voss, resident contact here at Helm Mechanical in Northern Illinois. Been with the company about 5 years.
Excellent. All right, Brian.
Brian Stewart. I'm a contact manager from Milwaukee Tool out of Milwaukee. Been here for about 4 years.
Very good. Dixon.
Yeah, Dixon Wright with USI Insurance, doing surety bonds, and been with Construction Progress Coalition, I think, since the beginning.
Excellent. Carlos.
Sorry. Carlos Laga, I'm with project engineer with Harkins Builders. I have joined you guys for a couple of sessions, and very interesting. Hopefully swaying some people to join in.
Very good. Thank you. Anil.
Thanks, Kelly. My name is Anil Sahani. I work for RICS, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. Excited to be in this session. And Brian, it gets easier. My kids only want access to my bank account. They don't need the toys.
Doesn't take long.
Can't wait.
All right. Let's see. We've got Dan.
Hi, good evening, folks. Dan O'Gorman, based out of Dublin, Ireland. I work for a company called Facility Solutions.
Thank you. Jeffrey.
Jeffrey Ouellette. I'm an independent consultant, basically in construction and built asset IT. Also, besides here at the CPC, do some work with Building Smart, both international and our local chapter.
Excellent. Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, hi, my name is Dan. As far as I'm with TG Technology, and I am in Seattle, Washington.
Okay. Maybe some other folks hanging out on the list here. Darren.
Darren Young, Director of Construction Technology for University of Mechanical Contractors up in Seattle.
Great. Britton.
Britton Langdon, M Suite here in beautiful Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So, Darren, you still got your Autodesk thing on. I love it.
Yeah, it's either that or fuzzy background.
How about you, Brett?
Sure. I'm Brett Stacks, based out of Austin, Texas. I'm the technology advocate for eVolveMEP.
Fantastic. Ralph.
I'm Ralph Schoch. I'm from Victaulic Company. I'm based out of Easton, Pennsylvania. Manage the software technology, internal support.
Excellent. And Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob Dalbora. I'm Director of BIM and FM Services at McVeigh and Mangum Engineering here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Excellent. I think that is everybody. If I missed you, I apologize. We'll go ahead and start through the process here. So today we're here to talk about the MEP components within the supply chain. I'm your moderator. I think you figured that out already. So we basically have some question we're going to answer here, which is how might we make BIM the standard container of MEP system and fabrication data from design to operations in ways that separate each stakeholder data requirements at different times across the project supply chain, so that all stakeholders can trust the information to make more timely decisions with greater confidence. So we have 4 folks with us today that are going to help give our spotlight perspectives and essentially represent different folks in the equation. So Darren, you're representing our fabricator. Brett, I believe you are representing our standards. Ralph, you're representing software, and Jacob, you're representing the engineers. So we would love to have input from anybody else along the way, but we'll be kind of bouncing back and forth between folks. But please let me know if you want to chime in or have some thoughts. That's what works best with these roundtable discussions, is when we bring these conversations in. So, Brett, I thought maybe we'd start off. You can kind of give us a history of how we got to where we are today around this topic.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover. I'll try and not get too long-winded with this, so we have plenty of time to discuss. And I apologize ahead of time for my voice. Been sick all week. So, so a couple of things. You guys are probably familiar with AGC BIM Forum. That's one of the governing bodies that drives standards in Australia and New Zealand. So it's one of those that's also driving its way into the UK and Canada. So that's a good basis for this topic. Just maybe thinking about that as far as how they've implemented it and how we might be able to move forward. And I'll come back to that one a little bit. So in my history, you guys probably know I've worked for Trimble and Autodesk. I've worked for a lot of the technology companies managing similar products to what I do now. Trimble, as you guys know, has acquired a lot of products over the years. And so they were faced very early with this problem, having so many different databases to manage. They have building data now, so they've built an internal standard. The problem they ran into when they started working through this was, number one, the problem was just too big for them. They started to include structure and architecture in the project. So, keeping an MEP focus is definitely something we need to do so that we don't go off too far on the tangents. But the other thing that they ran into was, they aligned it to their product strategy. So Trimble, for example, would purposely not deliver certain content because of their need to support strategy around the products that they wanted to succeed in their portfolio. So with that said, when we think about this as a governing body, we want to make sure that we're careful to be inclusive of multiple formats, multiple products. Don't get stuck on your experience around fabrication and RFAs, as an example. Another bit of a history that's good to understand is MCA made a stab at this. They try to deliver BIM content through their WebLem committee. Again, ran into a couple of challenges there. MCA is selective on the manufacturers they support due to the manufacturers that buy the higher level sponsorship will purposely block other manufacturers. So again, it wasn't inclusive. And again, they have somebody on their WebLem committee who is a manager at Trimble. So there was a lot of talk about partnership with building data, which takes us back to the former statements, that caused some issues around being inclusive of everybody that needs to be included there. And then finally, just talking about our more direct experience at the company I'm at now, we've got a database we've been managing like most of our customers, for 7+ years. And we work with contractors all over the country. And so we do have an internal standard around that. So we partnered with a company that was currently managing the BIM-MEP standardization. And we thought that might be a good way to start to bring over that former structure with BIM-MEP into the US market and mix it with some of our own experience to deliver something US based. Unfortunately, the company that's managing that content, or was at the time that we were considering that, has a really negative experience or reputation in the US market. So we broke that partnership pretty early on. So today we still have those standards and we deliver that to our customer base, but and it's something that we could consider as a way to contribute to this project. But yeah, that's pretty much my experience with this. It's it's a big problem to undertake, and I appreciate everybody on here helping to discuss what our options are.
Fantastic. So that kind of lets us know where we came from and perhaps some of the reasons why it didn't work. What's your thoughts about who needs to be at the table, Brett?
I definitely like the way that you started this, where we definitely want to include software vendors, customers, manufacturers, all of the above, right? One of the problems that we have, Victaulic's a great example here because they're always very proactive in serving their clients with whatever content they need to. When I manage QuickBin, they deliver to QuickBin database. When they do the same thing for the fabrication database and other databases for other products out there to make sure that their clients always have a current Victaulic database, right? Other manufacturers, unfortunately, don't have that experience. So as we develop the standards, it's the next challenge we'll run into is how are they actually going to deliver that content and what formats? Unfortunately, today we see a lot of people use 3D Studio Max or whatever to build a valve and then try to export that out into, you know, DWGs or whatever. So we need to make sure that it's you know, that we consider, you know, how these manufacturers can actually execute this, and involving more talent in these conversations is going to help us.
Very good. Jacob, do you have any thoughts on you know, any other players that should be at the table?
No, I think a big part of that is left onto the manufacturers. You know, it's sad as you go through MEP manufacturing websites, you can find one that, I mean, looks like Angel Fire from 1998 and you barely can get downloads on. But then there's another ones that, you know, basically they've built their own BIM database. They give it away for free. They put it out there on the market. I mean, there's groups like Victaulic are building everything to their own plugins so people can be more, you know, involved with their system too. But I think manufacturers become some of the biggest needs for it, especially if you want your stuff going to be fabricated.
Sure. Ralph, can you give us a little bit of perspective on how Victaulic looks at their seat at the table, since Brett called it out as both Brett and Jacob calling it out on the good side?
Well, I mean, we've been building content. Shoot, it feels like 20 years now, right? We started with Autocad Blocks, and you know, it really, for a manufacturer, you know, we just want customers to be able to easily use our products, right? So, you know, if you're trying to do some modeling, you know, we understand the detailers out there, fabricators, you know, they're just trying to get their job done. You know, we have a big ask that they're using our products, and they agree to that. So our goal really is, let's make that transition to using our products just a lot easier. You know, there's a lot of data in making content. Content's not that easy. Honestly, you know, over the years, we've made a lot of mistakes. We probably, you know, we rebuilt entire product libraries because we just didn't get it right the first time, you know, and some of those libraries we actually used internally, and we realized how bad they were. So we fixed them and made them right. But, you know, yeah, it's an expensive game to be in too. You know, you look at what it costs to get a product line put into a piece of software, you know, it's a pretty big investment. So if you're not realizing that with product sales and, you know, justifying that, it becomes a difficult ask, and, you know, difficult to get the drive in your company. You know, I've talked to many manufacturers, and, you know, they've built tons of content and just very little of it really gets used. You know, and there's a handful of reasons for that, you know, building the wrong stuff, you know, building wrong tools that didn't really meet the industry. But, you know, it's really, I think it's definitely important that people partner with the manufacturers they use, and focus back on them and say, you know, hey, we need the data for these products and for us to be able to use them in our designs. For us, that's really what was the driving force really day one is, you know, customer came to us and said, you know, hey, we need data we need files, we need databases, we need component product files to be able to place these components in our model, and we don't have the time to do it. So, you know, that's really where all this came from, and, you know, just to make it easier to use our products. I think some of the challenge we have is, you know, some products out in the industry are more commodities. Those are always going to be tough, you know, to get companies, you know, like Weldben and things to make content. You know, there's tons of welded content out there, so it's a lot easier. But, you know, those commodity type products are a challenge. I think you know, if anybody's ever used some of the PVC products out there, they've always been a challenge too. Just getting good content, and the amount of time that really hurts you in a project can be really unbelievable. That's one of the things that as we went through and developed a lot of the content, we realized how much time we could actually affect people and their productivity. So if your content's not set up right, it can really kill productivity of your the modeling staff. And, I've worked with standard groups all over the country and really all over the world. And, one thing that's interesting over Europe is it's almost in some ways worse because they end up getting a standard for each country. So, it's really important that, if we're going to develop something as far as standardization across the US, that, all the key players get together. And I do think manufacturers can put a lot of leverage on the content providers, the software manufacturers, to help, drive a general standardization.
That's a very complete answer, and you covered a lot of ground there. Darren, I want to make a shift over to you for a second, because you tend to be on the receiving end of this information and have to do something with it. And I'm sure I've seen all kinds of challenges when you have to deal with that content. Can you give us a little feel for what it's like to be on the receiving end?
Kind of feel like I'm getting screwed. I at the same time, I have some empathy. You look at a company like Victaulic that Ralph works for, they come up with a new product line. They make one new product and they support 20 different formats for that. They have to make more versions of virtual. I mean, the inventory of virtual content is 20 times what their physical product line is. The software vendors also have a hard part of it, that just some of the content is not very agnostic. Ralph can build me content, but it doesn't necessarily integrate with my system. So how do you do that how do you fix some of this stuff? I guess, some of this, I think you can skin it a little bit at the time. The software vendors aren't going to build their own standards if there are none. So you're going to get unique things, but there are some things I think we could easily standardize on. I've tracked before on, the cost internally to build fabrication ITM based content. It's about 4 hours of fitting. The geometry doesn't take that long, unless it's maybe a new library or something really complicated. What takes time is looking up labor codes, looking up price codes, sometimes just finding the darn submittal and getting the dimensional data. Is there an industry standard associated with it? Well, now I might need to buy ASTM standard, to get some information, or MSS, or maybe it's out of ASME. Some of the products are a combination of like a pressed copper fitting, or part of the the standard comes out of ASME, but the cup dimensions are manufacturer specific. So just to build the content, assuming we do get the submittal information, quite often we don't even have the proper dimensions on there, and we're calling the vendor to the manufacturer to find out distances, anything that would cut lengths. But just standardizing on these are the types of dimensions we need on an elbow, on a valve, on a T, on a coupling, or on a reducer. Standardizing simply things like that would make the content easier to consume, as well as just having more standards around how that metadata is associated with it. Why can't when I download content, why doesn't it know what labor codes are associated with that, whether it's MCA or other labor books? Those are a lot of the challenges we have, is just finding the information can be a major task, and managing all of that. So like I said, it's, if there's different things you want. An engineering firm, they care about certain things. A fabricator, contractor cares about others. If you do design build, you're going to care some about both of them, but they're difficult to marry those two worlds. There's detail I want that Jacob doesn't care about. There's detail he wants that I may not care about. There's detail that we both care about. And just having a standard way of being able to specify that, so that, hey, this content is, this is design related content, or it's fabrication certified content, so that we know it's accurate to build off of. I think it was Brett put a little chat in there about the LOD specs, and having content built around that, so that you understand what that content can and can't be used for.
That sounds like it would help certainly guide you to feeling less like everybody's just giving you garbage, right? Which is kind of like what you expressed in the beginning. So Jacob, who do you see as who can get involved to start driving these standards? Is it different than the stakeholders that we talked about in the first place to have the conversation? Does this need to be an independent organization? Where does openness fall into all this?
I think it's the groups representing the trades actually going to have a big push for it. So SMACNA, Josh with Electree, and all the different types of pipe fitting organizations out there. I mean, they're going to be the ones that are going to be dictating this. I have had numerous conversations with Josh Bone and how he is looking how electricians are going to work in the future. How are they going to train them? How are they going to get them ready for all the fabrication side that's coming? And I think it's a lot of their weight that could push these standards and this idea of what's going to be needed. I think it's also going to be in partnerships with big companies. Emerson is now Emerson Greenlee and 20 other companies underneath it. And it kind of touches every single trade in the market now. So that they have a huge weight because they produce, the actual pipe, and they produce the actual cutter that actually goes and cuts it. And they actually produce the conduit bender now. And they have everything set for manufacturing where they can give us the data on the design side, but also take it all the way through to set up for fabrication.
Britton, how do you deal with this from a software perspective? What kind of variables are important to you?
Many. The thing I think we look at it as, until there's a standard, we have to accommodate really anybody. And the biggest challenge isn't, the Victaulics or the Trimbles or the, eVolves of the world. It's the custom stuff. It's the stuff that people have 3 guys in their office and they're building everything to fit their needs. And then they go out and buy a software, not necessarily ours, but any software, and they ask it to comply with whatever standard they set up for themselves. It is a challenging thing for any software company to do, but it's something that we all have to accommodate for. I just think, from a dollars and cents perspective, content, and I was telling Nate this a while ago, content to me is the highway to get where we want to go. It shouldn't be a tollway. And I think if we can standardize the idea of content being that, then, and we look at that perspective, then we can quit trying to monetize it, though there is a cost to it, quit trying to monetize it and make it the way to the destination. We're so focused on the road that we forget where we're trying to go. And I know that for any of the software providers on here, or really anybody on this call, we would benefit from a truly standardized content like, I can't remember who said it earlier, but they were talking about BIM pause. So if we could get to that level, it's just a matter of who is BIM pause in the United States because of how fractured we are as an industry.
I would agree with what Britton said there. I typically have my own standard, and that's because there isn't one. If I could get everything from one place to one standard that met what my requirements were, I would adopt that standard. Just, but there isn't anything. So in lieu of having partially Victaulic standard, because Ralph built some things, but I procured others from other sources, I have to make one standard and massage all that stuff into my system. But I would love to take a standard. I'm curious what, Brett, I'm curious of Brett's thoughts on this, because Australia is a much smaller market. There's fewer players at the table, fewer vendors, manufacturers. How do you do that in a market like the United States?
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, when we were starting that project, we were really looking at taking their baseline and then expanding that for our market. That was the goal. And unfortunately, the partner we were partnered with just wasn't the right one. And the way Britton put that was so well put. It should be a governing body that's not trying to, kill this opportunity by supporting their own internal strategy, for a particular product or manufacturer or whatever, right? So that's where BIM-MEP has succeeded, because it wasn't driven by a specific software company or whatever, right? So we never, unfortunately, like I said, made the progress on that we needed to really give you the example you need. But and with so many uninformed manufacturers out there, that it's a big challenge. So at some point, we're going to have to leave these. Now, there's the good news we have here is you've got a lot of big vendors like Ferguson and others that are starting to get involved. And I think they could help drive that initiative on behalf of the manufacturers.
So we're talking about standards and looking for an organization that can help drive that without trying to make a buck along the way, because that's what spoils the pot, right? You said that during the history. We just said it again. Anil, I see you've dropped a couple of links in here about different standards, and I know that's the world that you live in. Can you give us some perspective on that?
Sure. So, means I'm late to this discussion, but the reason I joined Kelly was that we wrote a paper. We are a not-for-profit member-based organization out of the UK. We wrote a paper in 2015 on getting information content for cost estimators, what we call quantity surveyors, because about 45,000 of our 135,000 members globally work in that space. And it's a long paper, but the bottom line is there's no information. The information is not there for them to do their QTO, pricing, estimating, and so on in a BIM model. That was the conclusion. Then now we've been tasked to update that. So my first question to all of you is, has that changed? Can I now take a model and extract content as an estimator, quantity surveyor to get that information? So that then ties back to standards. We are a standards body. We build international standards, sometimes alone as an organization, sometimes in coalition. So we create global coalitions of standard setting bodies, not for profit, public good. We have, for example, a standard called New Rules of Measurement, which is more Commonwealth countries specific, where we have digital recipes of how to measure work, quantify cost, price work. It's freely available, open source, done through public consultation. So I think that's really what is needed. There's some UK-based initiatives that I've shared with you. There's a work coming out of IET, one of our sister organizations that we collaborate with, talking about essentially what can product manufacturers do in terms of cutting through all this maze. And then ISO has a couple of standards, and I noticed somebody else's of 23387, 23386, which essentially are product data templates and may have some relevance to this discussion. So as RICS, we are happy to provide that collective, that common non-commercial space for standard setting. Not that we have the expertise in this particular domain, which is MEP, but we do have broader built environment sort of credibility and expertise in the work that we're doing. So we're definitely interested, and we can share best practices on how to rapidly deploy, develop, consult, and deploy standards.
Appreciate that. Gives us a little extra perspective there. Dan, you've been contributing some thoughts to this as well. I think Anil was just referring to what you put up. If you want to jump on and give us some thoughts around what you've been describing.
Yeah, so folks, Dan O'Gorman here again. I'm based out of Ireland, and I am a member of the RICS, the Chartered Surveyors. So I share the thoughts of the previous speaker. So basically what I've moved into is I spent 16 years working for Doyle. So I have the advantage of working both in high-tech industry and in the construction industry for over 42 years. So to give you an idea of my age. So I've gone through a lot of change, but what I'm driving now in the current company, and we're working on the National Children's Hospital, and we also have clients right across Europe working in the data center space for some of the big names in that space. And what we do is we manage the CDE, Common Data Environment, and the DCHI, which is Digital Construction Handover Information. Now, this all ties in together in that everybody in this call knows that 10 to 20% of the total cost of ownership is in the building space. The other 80 to 90% is in the operational space, but the decisions made during the design and construction have a fundamental difference or impact on how you get both an environmental solution and lower OPEX during the operation phase. And it's all back to data. I've worked with BIM for years. I'm a proponent of BIM, But really what we've come to realize now through the Nordic experience, and this is Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland, is that their governments have mandated that every supplier to the construction industry, particularly in Norway, must provide a product data template. In that product data template, which I just sent the last link there, there's, as an example of a window, you have all the key information that's required from a sustainability perspective, from an optics management perspective, and from a fire safety perspective. Everything is there. So the designer then has this fantastic source of knowledge that has interoperable capabilities, and it is following ISO 22386 and 22387, so it's a common language globally. It also uses Uniclass. Omniclass I know is used in the US, but in Europe and around the rest of the world it's predominantly Uniclass. But again, they have mapped, as you'll see in the link I send there, they have mapped Uniclass and Omniclass together, so it's again interoperable. The net result of all this is that in London today, just like in Norway, if you're designing or looking for planning permit to build an office block, you have to complete now a whole life cycle carbon assessment. And basically that is a bottoms up approach, not a wink and a nod where you sometimes get with LEED or BREEAM certification. It is the designers have to prove that the embodied carbon for this particular building is X, and the operational carbon for this particular building is Y, based on the air handling units, the chillers, the elevators, and every other electromechanical piece of plant they pick. And that is actually changing the industry in London as well, and that is now spreading across Europe to France, to Czech Republic, and the Benelux countries. And so I was on a call last night with New Zealand, with the New Zealand team, and they're looking at adopting it as well in the healthcare sector in that area. So the good news is there's a lot of change happening. I think it's been driven by three things: that the big players, the big corporations globally are totally focused on sustainability and being green. And because they're putting that infrastructure in place, as I explained earlier, then other benefits accrue, because given my Dell experience for 16 years and Japanese experience working for a Japanese company for 6 years before that, is that once you make that investment in the hardware and the process and the systems, well, then you can tag on other benefits like costing and 4D, 5D, and all the rest. The other thing we're working on, just to finish with this, is we're working with GS1, which is a global standard. So if you go into, I heard somebody talking, they were from Austin. I spent a lot of time in Austin when I worked in Dell. But if you buy a box of Kellogg's cornflakes in Austin and bring it to Timbuktu or Shanghai or Nepal or anywhere in the world, that and you go through an electronic point of sale, that will still show you a box of cornflakes. Now the price will be different, obviously. The currency will be different, but it's still a box of cornflakes. The key there is that unique identifier within the barcode is managed globally by GS1. The only country in the world that GS1 has not a presence is North Korea, for obvious reasons. So that standard then is in, if those tags are put on at design, at manufacturing stage, well then the owner operator actually has a guarantee, just like the CE marking we use in Europe, that the design performance design criteria that was used in design is followed through, because anybody can read that QR code through a standard phone and then validate that the original design parameters are actually incorporated in the physical product that's actually you're looking at in front of you. So that's a fundamental change in how you actually control, and it's all paperless and it's frictionless. So that's what we're pushing from a European perspective. And as you can see in some of the links I sent, we've been quite successful in the Nordics, and we're bringing this now to Ireland as well. So thanks very much for your time.
No, I appreciate the input, and it was triggering a thought in my head, and Britton, you beat me to it. You know, obviously there's ways to get things done with government mandate, right? In previous discussions around digital twin, Paul Daugherty's talked about how much easier it is to do things in China because they just say do it. and everybody has
Yeah, I
to
know
do
Paul
it.
very
right?
well. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
He said the
exactly.
exact same thing to me.
So Britton, your thought of market versus mandate. I don't want to get into all the reasons why we can't do things. We're trying to solve for how we can. But what made your mind go there? And maybe Brett, you can start thinking about how does that apply to the story that you've told, and is there a light at the end of the tunnel, or what, based upon that history? I'll let you go first, Britton.
No, yeah, I think it's, Nate brought it up in the chat as well when he's talking about, the way we respond to green building and MSDS. And there's a lot of different industries out there that federally mandate certain things, food and beverage, as the FDA, and there's a lot of things around the cornflakes conversation that you were just bringing up, Dan. Is a country the size of the United States and as diverse as the United States is going to be able to federally mandate a certain way of building? I would love it if we had that much strength in the United States to standardize at a government level. It's just not on the radar. Because we're talking MEP content, we're not even talking about architects, engineers, and general contractors. We're talking subcontractor, specialty contractor design, effectively. And we are not on the radar of priorities for our federal government today, right, wrong, or indifferent, which is fine. And I think we can do it on our own. I don't think necessarily we have to mandate. I do think there is going to have to be some central body, and to your point, Dan, a nonprofit organization that drives this every day. And if it's like the MCAA, but more global, so it's not, union-based contractors, it's every contractor that is basically focused on pushing BIM content, great. I don't know what that structure looks like, but I do think it's going to have to be a third party that is their focus, in my opinion.
Appreciate that.
And I think the market's driving it. The fact that we're having this conversation,
sure,
I think the market is pushing it that way. It's just, how do we do it is the real question.
So Brett, can you apply the well? Oh, sorry,
real quick, Kelly.
Yeah.
I do have something for the mandate. I don't think it's going to be a mandate of BIM content or standard that would come down. It would be a mandate of prefabrication, that all jobs going to have to start doing this much prefab for the project. That's what's going to end up driving it, because everything that comes into that scenario is basically a sub is going to be able to go and get better labor, cheaper labor if they have it prefabbed. And then you're going to start doing it from a BIM to fabrication standpoint. And you got groups out there like Allied BIM right now that is literally tying straight into your fabrication machines. And that's what's going to push it. I think it's really going to be more of, hey, how do we deal with labor shortage? How do we deal with efficiency? And once the trades start, attempting to tackle that, that's going to start turning around and telling manufacturers, hey, we have to have our content in there, because if we want X, Y, and Z trades to buy our content and install it, they have to be able to put it in their BIM model for their detailers to put it into the fabrication.
I think what you're saying is what to do, not how to do it.
Right.
Exactly. So Jacob's 100% correct there. I mean, the key to this is offsite fabrication. There's a company in the UK called Lang O'Rourke, and they've said by 2025, which isn't that far away, that 90% of all their projects going forward will be offsite fabricated. And they're so big, they will reject jobs where the client is insisting on the traditional approach. They will instead go to clients and mature clients who realize, as you just said, Jacob, that there is efficiencies, there is better quality, there's a faster build, there's a more environmental solution here if you go down the offsite construction, or what we call over here modern methods of construction, and follow that process. And the key to that, and that's why I brought up about my 16 years in Dell, we could only put components into a chassis back in the day when we were all using desktops, simply because each supplier, whether it was Foxconn, Intel, any of the other companies that we used back then, Philips, Sony, and Nokia, only if they provided us with that prescriptive amount of information that ensured that every component we put into that box actually could work in unison with the other components within that box. And it's all down to data. I mean, we've all heard the phrase, data is the new gold. nowhere else other than construction is data the new gold, because we have to get away from this paperless and the checkers checking checkers. Because the biggest problem we face in Ireland today and in the UK is now finding apprentices and graduates who will first of all join the construction industry and the architectural design and engineering industries and stay there, because simply there's so much bureaucracy now coming our way because of what happened with Grenfell Towers, where 72 people lost their lives, that it is just driving people out of the industry because they find themselves they have to just passing PDFs for no apparent reason when that's not necessary anymore. So we have to make a change, and it's going to be driven by cost, because the cost of building, I don't know what's happening in the States, but the cost per square meter in Europe is now getting to a stage where it's becoming prohibitive to actually go and get investment from savvy investors.
So we've established that the standard is necessary, right? And we could use a nonprofit organization to keep the money out of it, so it truly becomes democratized amongst all the players. What about timing? Where do the standards become critical? Does it become critical before the designers get involved because they need it from the get-go? Is it more critical down the path? Might be a naive question, but one that comes to mind.
I think the democratized approach is a long play versus a short play. I think if you want to remove the Britain's dream of like, let's take the monetization away from it, I don't think people respond to that quickly. I think that the quick response is something like, and I'm just throwing this out there, but go to the big 5 builders that everybody's worked for across the country. Go to Apple and Google and the people that are putting more money into the industry in a capital project standpoint, and have the industry write them a white paper. Have the associations come together and say, hey, this is something that we think hits the bottom line, and get schedule done faster. And you guys need to drive this and vote, with your dollar as the developer of the project, and let that trickle down, and then use that to grow. What did I hear, Nika, that there's only like 1,600 prefab shops full functioning in North America right now. And so can they handle the demand when you start to structure the data to say all projects will now use this? Who's ready? 1,600 companies raise their hand. If they see that coming down the funnel for backlog, for project specs, owners' requests, maybe they'll spin up a prefab shop faster. And the demand and groundswell for that will grow.
Yeah, Merck Pharmaceuticals has put I think 65% prefab by 2025 for all projects. And I mean, they're doing $6 billion worth of work over the next 3 years. So, I mean, it's something like that really does, all the trades out there are like, holy crap, how do we do prefab?
Like, look at all the attention that the stimulus bill is getting for transportation infrastructure and how people are chasing that as this holy grail of revenue short term. But if you put together the top 5 logos of builders and added up that spend, it far surpasses that stimulus bill. And it's over the course of the next 5 years or 10 years of spend, right? So yes, we can democratize it. Yes, we can try to create and this is just my thoughts, by the way, but it just seems like that's such a long play that to get the ball rolling and momentum started, convince your owners that this is the path of the future, so that they can make their architects create models that have structured data that we can consume, that there's technology specs we've talked about in these meetings before.
I think that's one of the problems with the market-driven approach is you started getting into like the trades and MEP in specific. You don't see quite the I'd say the institutional or educational pedigree that you see in engineering and architecture. A lot of these guys that run the companies have come from the trades. They understand materials and labor. So they will swap materials for something merely more than a good price. But you look at some of these vendors or manufacturers from a manufacturing standpoint, they don't even have quality programs. I could give you some horror stories of just the diversity of fittings within the same manufacturer dimensionally that you can't plan prefabrication around. We went so as far as before to run down the supply house and buy one of every fitting size and measure it because it didn't match the information the manufacturer provided. And then you have other manufacturers that are competitors that actually do have a lot better quality. And you still don't see a lot of market shift yet. I think it's slowly changing, but you don't see contractors, we're going to pick them because we can count on their dimensional accuracy on the actual physical product. I see a few companies starting to do that, but not a lot yet. But that's one way, is just, is trying to get the manufacturers to understand, hey, we're trying to prefabricate. We need consistency in your product size.
But what's the chicken and the egg there, right? Because you make a good point, right? Because Jacob is saying, if it's required, if the owner says it's required, or I guess maybe Nate was saying that, then the shops have to do it, right? Well, then the shops can't do it, to your point, if they're dimensionally incorrect.
Well, we can.
What's just the chicken and the egg, right?
We can. It's just very, very inefficient. You can't pre-plan it. You can't automate it. You can't drive it out of a system like M Suite, GTP Stratus, Allied BIM. You can't drive the automated cutting, because you have to measure your fitting and do the math manually out in the shop to do your prefabrication. So the prefabrication technically can be done. It's just not very efficient, or you end up having some rework to compensate for it.
Or you partner very early with your manufacturers, the same way we do for like specification of solar panels, right? I need all of the little bidders to not chase this big job, so I write a spec that eliminates.
Yeah, it's probably easier to do it. Easier to do with equipment. I think, Ralph brought up commodity. Pipe fittings and valves seem like a commodity product, so people don't pay attention to them the same way they do a chiller. Because it's just, it's a bulk buy. I can save a little bit of money over here, not realizing the amount of rework that can take just by swapping a manufacturer halfway through, because you can save a few dollars.
How does steel do it with stuff like Tekla models, right? Where every single little piece is already sort of there. Like they're a little farther ahead in that whole design all the way through to installation.
It's a little bit different with steel, because you have standardization within the steel market, right? So an I-beam's an I-beam, but when you're buying a copper elbow from one manufacturer to the next, there's specific differences that keep us from prefab. So that's a problem we're running into the most, is that granular data that we're after on the contracting side.
So if we're chasing that holy grail of being able to have an owner says it's so, we don't necessarily need a government mandate, but owners say we mandate it, we want it in our buildings, therefore we need the shops that can do this, therefore we need the manufacturers to produce the equipment and materials that we need. If they're driving that demand, is there any manufacturer or set of manufacturers, let's say somebody waves the magic wand and now all of a sudden we have to do it to the point there's only 1,600 shops, are they going to be able to handle that volume? Are the manufacturers going to be able to handle that volume with the requisite level of quality that Darren needs to be efficient enough to meet that demand, because he's the only shop in that area that does to that level of quality, working with a manufacturer that has the materials at that level of quality. Be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. What does that perspective look like?
I don't see it being driven from the owner. If you're talking large campus, major owners, government, institutional, you're going to run into some sophisticated people that understand supply chain, but the bulk of commercial construction isn't that way. We'll bid out, the shell and core will be bid out separately from the TI, and the shell and core people have already demobilized the crane, even though the TI crew could do it, because the developer doesn't care. He wants to take his money and run. And at the end of the day, if I'm an owner, I want construction to operate better. But when I'm looking at a project, I really don't care. I don't care how you build it. I want the building. The prefabrication is actually an efficiency thing that the manufacturer wants to do. And so when they start operating more efficiently, they'll naturally be selected. But the owner really, I don't want an owner dictating to me how to fabricate, because my shop is different than the next guy's shop. And, when they start dictating the means and methods on how I be efficient, they're actually stopping me from being efficient.
Yeah, I'm not advocating that they're telling you how to fabricate, but by creating the demand with a certain expectation, your shops are going to, in order to qualify for that job, your contractors, in order to be able to qualify for that job, are going to have to hit a particular standard and hire shops that can hit a particular standard, who are going to use material providers who can hit a particular standard, because it's like the old way. If you write the RFP, only people write RFPs with the parties in mind, and to Nate's point, they create a standard that only 3 people can hit, or oh shit, only 1 person can handle, right?
There's 2 things here. One, I've done it and it's painful. Apple said, we're going to use this part from Europe. I don't care if it's not UL listed, get it UL listed. Or I want curved glass, and the company says no, so they buy the company. And so at a large capital project, I totally agree. That's there, they're informed. Forgot the second thing.
Well, is that even possible in what we're trying to describe here, right? If you can we may even wave that magic wand if we wanted to?
Yeah, the second thing, I'm sorry, is the path forward isn't dictation and someone's going to tell me and it's linear in communication. That's a design, bid, build model. The future, not a pitch here, is the collaborative model of connecting everybody in construction to be able to have owner directly talking to manufacturer in the planning stage of a project so that they can consider, should I be selecting this or not? And what are those risks? Am I sole sourcing and pricing is going to affect, or is quality more important because I am building a rocket ship that we're going to hand build every part versus a TI core shell that's going to be separated? And we don't need that granular level of modeling detail for this project. I don't think that you're going to see the down segment or half of the TAM in the whole construction industry at the mid-market or below adopting this, because the demand for specificity on a project that's that general is gonna be utilized. You're gonna see it at market. You're gonna see it on these custom capital projects. I think that's where you start.
So Kelly, if I can jump in
Yep.
and put on my software and service hat here a minute. For me to deliver content to Travis or Darren, for example, I have to currently build off their standards because there's no industry standard, right? So what we need from the standard, first and foremost, is just naming conventions, parameter definitions, those types of things at a very high level, so that the data is consistent across the board, regardless of its family, ITM, or whatever. That's the standard we deliver to our clients right now with the content we deliver. But as soon as they customize it, we get back into that same problem where I cannot deliver content to that customer without causing duplication of materials, connectors, whatever, because I'm not following their naming conventions. So for me to kick this project off, that's what we really need as a starting point. And then we can get into some of this more granular stuff down the line.
I'll agree with you, Brent.
Yeah, there has to be a place to start, right? And that's what you're describing. And is that perhaps the first part of the standard? And Anil, I see you're raising your hand. Got something to contribute there?
Yeah, means I just wanted to comment on the owner issue. We've tried that approach. That works convincing owners, clients, project sponsors, if we are talking about project level outcomes, which they can understand and grasp to. When you start going into operational efficiencies, there are tier 2, tier 3, further down the value chain, supply chain, project delivery network, it becomes very difficult to convince them to invest in something like that. And also means I have had conversations where we go and pitch that if we do this data standardization, it's going to become more efficient. And some of the smart owners say, okay, then that means, can you save me 5% of the project cost? So should I deduct that from your fee? I think most of the people run away at that stage from that conversation. So I think this got to be technically driven as we do our standards with technical experts in the creating of that common standard that everyone benefits from. Because if it's going to be directed towards one owner, their projects and their supply chain, I think it becomes very difficult to then disseminate that as a standard. That's what our experience is. We're just going to be releasing a standard where, and this is again to that point, it's a higher level standard where we are standardizing the way upfront embodied carbon and operational carbon on constructed assets can be reported. So it's an easier sell because everyone is setting targets on carbon, and it's top of the mind. So it's easier to convince all stakeholders. But on something like this, which is much more detailed, much more technical, and requires a lot of input, I think it needs to be a collective effort.
So we've been talking, Jeffrey, you'll relate to this, about, you know, the candy and the wrapper when it comes to like the master or universal project ID, and there needs to be the candy that attracts people to open up the wrapper and get into it, right? So what is the candy for if it's a collaborative approach, if it's not a top down, if it's organic, what's the incentive? Because it seems like everybody has a different incentive here. So we need to get Brett that minimum amount of information, but what gets people to care enough to give them that minimum amount of information? So at what point does somebody just need to do it, and that creates the market swell, the momentum to move the ball?
From a manufacturer standpoint, or a fabricator standpoint, I guess we manufacture too, but not the same way as a component, a Victaulic. But if there was an independent organization, and because I can't rely on MCA or the trade organizations because they're union or non-union, or they kind of partner with certain vendors that don't want to offend the people that supply their revenue. But if there's an independent group that said, hey, manufacturer, you need to have, there's a certification you can achieve that says that your product line meets prefabrication quality and tolerance standards. So I know that I'm not going to have dimensional differences in physical product that affect my prefabrication. I'm going to select that product as a contractor over them. Hey, like I said, it's very few and far between that I've heard this, but I heard one contractor said, I will pick manufacturer B over A, even if they're twice the price, because I can count on their product to being dimensionally accurate. There's just a very simple standard. Hey, if it's prefabrication, it needs, these things need to be within certain tolerance. You match that, you get a certification. The next step of that is, okay, what is that? What are those dimensions? Can you actually provide that dimensional data in a consistent way between manufacturers, so I can actually consume it? Or Brett, if he's building content, he can consume it easily, compare it between manufacturers. Somebody like Britton with M Suite, if he's going to automate machine, cutting of pipe, he can look between those manufacturers A and B and see, hey, because they tell me the length of pipe that gets cut out to fit a valve in there, I know the differences, and I can compensate on my cut lists automatically when we swap vendors. Simple things like that. And at that point, it seems like maybe the next point gets to Brett's level is, hey, if you're going to provide data to me, this is how I want you to name stainless steel. Don't call it SS 304, 304. I don't want 10 different variants of stainless steel. This is how I want my materials named in a standardized format that everybody can agree to. But there's like several different levels. And like I said, for me is just, can I count on the product dimensionally so that I can actually plan?
So to me, it sounds like at least in the MEP world, and somebody had alluded to steel before, what you're really lacking is the ability or you're lacking that same sort of adherence to ISO standards and ASTM standards that the steel industry does, right? That says, okay, we're going to manufacture I-beams. Now, granted, it's a lot less complicated than a valve or, but I would say it's on par with, say piping and fittings and those types of things. Why can't there be a industry collective understanding that, you will meet those requirements, you will meet those types of standards, and if you don't, you can't sell.
Yeah, I mean, there are standards like that. Welded fittings have a standard around them. But if you look at like even the plumbing trades, there is such a diversity of products. Somebody comes out with a complete new product line. It's not like there's you've got mass timber, you've got steel, you've got concrete. It's not like somebody comes out with an extruded plastic I-beam that we're going to start using, and well, here's another piece of steel, and we're just going to push fit them together instead of rivet them together or bolt them together. There's such a diversity in product. It's some of the commodity product there is standards, but something like copper, sweat fittings, that's a commodity product. It's been around forever and there's still not a standard. You know, I can name 4 different manufacturers and they're all different.
Darren, could you tier the material that you fabricate and model to say like it's critical in this group that it's, I mean, to your tolerances must be within 0.5% versus you get into different tiering of material where we could have up to 4% tolerances on dimensional data because like in electrical, right? We're always the ones that can make the adjustment. We can bend the pipe a different direction. It's okay. You have the ability to communicate that to architect, manufacturer, or it just depends on the build?
I think as an industry, we could communicate some of that stuff better, but you'll probably see differences. There's some contractors that think, yeah, copper's all the same. It's close enough. It's not accurate. Don't worry about it. And they make it up in the field. But I don't think we should be promoting less standards, but you know, tell me what the length is. You know, when I stick 2 pieces of pipe into your fitting, how far are those ends of the piece of pipe? Tell me what that is and deliver it consistently within a reasonable tolerance that a manufacturer would use. That's all I'm asking for.
Darren, the length of carbon steel pipe isn't consistent. So, I mean,
we cut every one of them.
It's called random for a reason. You know, it's stupid. I agree. If you could get to a basic level of standardization, things would be a lot easier. And that has nothing to do with content. It would just make the content standard.
Yeah. So then I think that goes back to one of the things that Kelly knows I push at all the time. And it's not a technical problem. It's a people problem. It's, you know, people not willing to stand up and say, okay, we're going to do a higher quality. We're going to do, it's important that we have consistency and it's important that we do this the right way every time, all day, every day. And that we have agreement that, you know, the 40 manufacturers of commodity copper piping, we're going to do it so that it looks and works the same. And some people ask, well, then what's your competitive advantage? Well, the competitive advantage is that I just got to do a better job and my margins are better. So I've just got to be more efficient and, you know, my supply of copper or whatever it may be, my distribution channel, whatever is where I, you know, I show I make my money and the quality of the product. As long as I meet the minimum, you know, I'm in, but if somebody's going to do more than the minimum, that's, you know, I may lose out to them. I may lose out to them on a price issue, or I may lose out to them on a quality issue. But I think, you know, this is the same thing. You know, we face a lot of problems is, you know, there is a choice. There's a choice of using lots of standards that are already out there. The question is, you know, do you buy into that? And are you willing to say, okay, yes, we're going to use it. We're going to do it. And I think too often, especially in the US market, the response is, no, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it because A, I don't have to, B, it may cost me too much. C, it's too much trouble. D, nobody really cares. You know, again, all, you know, and what, how do I self-motivate people to say, I want to do the right thing. I want to do the right thing every time, right? Doesn't matter whether it's expensive or cheap or whatever, I got to do the right thing every time. And, you know, I think that's hard right now. I think it's really hard.
Well, from a lean perspective, value is defined by the customer, right? So as a, you know, the manufacturers will not change if I'm not willing to pay for them to change, you know, by selecting their product. And that's where, as an industry, I think we need to get better about making those value-based judgments, not just costs.
Yeah. I mean, you know, this is, Anil pointed it out, you know, it's, you know, trying to deal with owners has been hard because there's so much of it owners don't understand, right? The comment was made, well, just, you know, give me the building, right? I need my building. And the lack of expertise on their level to understand everything that goes into that and why decisions can have, like small decisions can have huge ripple effects, seems to, you know, get by so many of them because they just don't understand the complexities. Now, not everybody is that, you know, that way. But I think a lot of times is, you know, the owners are trying to operate a business. The asset that they're operating in isn't as well known as their business is, right? And I think there's more and more of a demand, as Anil pointed out, as we talk about sustainability and everything, that they have to, if they can't know it themselves, they have to put their trust in the people who do know that, right? And that's another thing is, yes, an owner can't know everything, So then they have to trust that the people who are delivering this project do have that expertise and do know what is the best thing to do. But then the pressure on the project delivery team is, well, what about the cost? Right?
I'm
What
going to
about
ask a targeted question. We have about 2 minutes left because we have a manufacturer here that has been recognized by multiple parties on the call that's doing the right thing. So Ralph, has Victaulic made a conscious decision to say, we're going to do all this right just because you guys want to do it right? Or is it because you've made some kind of internal calculations that have said, we win more often because we do all this?
You know what? I think it's a little combination of both, but you know, if you don't do it, you're going to be left behind, right? You know, so you know, it's that's really the name of the game. You know, I think standardization, talking about dimensional standardization, I think on products, it gets real challenging. You know, our products are different dimensions than others. You know, for us to change dimensions on things would be a massive cost difference. You know, it's just your inherent IP around your products. You know, but holding those products to a specific dimensional tolerance, that's incredibly important. You know, I don't think we can ever ask you know, all pipe fittings to be the same size, but we can definitely ask that if you say the pipe fitting's this size, it needs to be that size. And I think to me though too is with this whole thing is, you know, I think the challenge is we're going to ask a lot of people to change everything they're doing. Not everybody has really the interest to do that, right? So I think that's really the challenge. How do you deal with those people that aren't going to change or don't want to change, you know, tens of thousands or 100,000 pieces of content within libraries to meet a specific standard?
Important point. Okay, looks like we have about 90 seconds left. Anybody have any questions or thoughts that we haven't heard yet?
I just wanted to say one thing. Very simple statement. So when we are setting standards, what we ask ourselves with a set of experts who are helping set the standard is it really complex or are we making it complex? Sometimes the situation can be resolved by putting those lenses on.
Folks, the thing I'd like to add is that Ben, in the European perspective, is cash detection. It's dollars and euro. And simply because contractors now have discovered the power of 4D and 5D BEM. So they're able to identify where the waste and costs are. And clients are getting smarter as well. So that will drive the change. It's simply about data and visibility to where waste is happening. And the emphasis is on eliminating waste. That will drive the change because it all comes down to pounds, shillings, and pence, or dollars and cents. Okay.
So it sounds like that's the answer to the question, are you going to lower my fee by 5%? They're kind of demanding it. Because we know there is inefficiency out there, you can get to that inefficiency. You should be able to deliver this for less.
Yep, that's what happened to the UK car industry. I mean, the Japanese came in the 70s and the 80s when I was young, and because they came in with a better vehicle that broke down less, and they won the market. Same thing happened in the States. So it
is where we're not able to have that same leverage. So it's just a thought I'd share. This is a very interesting topic.
It's awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Nathan, I think that's time for us, right?
It is. Yeah, we're back in the main session. Everybody is back. All right. So moving on to supply chain with MEP and the fabrication components. I know Kelly was leading this discussion with a lot of seasoned MEP folks, as well as fabrication parts through Victaulic, and then engineer perspectives around, you know, looking at, again, the role of BIM as that kind of container for data across the supply chain, and how can we, you know, build more trust between engineers, fabricators, contractors, everybody that kind of touches that data. So Kelly, do you want to tell us a little bit of what happened in your discussion?
Yeah, it was actually a great opportunity to have different voices in the room who are really, everybody has the same focus, the same desire to drive some standards so that everybody can be more efficient. I'll tell you that there's a common thread between my usual digital twin conversation, our latest project, universal project ID conversation, and this conversation. It's the old candy in the wrapper, right? Who is really driving it? Who's going to make it happen? Who's going to run the standards? Everybody agrees it needs to happen, but it shouldn't happen with somebody who has to make a penny at it, or $1 or $5, because that's what ruins the whole process, right? So we got some history about it. We talked about who needs to be at the table, and it was interesting to hear everybody's perspective. We spent a fair amount of time trying to determine what's going to drive it, right? Is it the owners that are going to say we require that you use prefabrication, which is going to make the shops have to spin up more quality in there to meet that, to buy from manufacturers that create that product within those tolerances, or is it the contractors? It was all back and forth all over the place. It was great conversation around that, and I think there's a lot of motivation to advance this idea forward. As usual, probably more questions came out of it than answers, but it was a great conversation, definitely worth watching. Check out the YouTube post.